Brutal Orchestra is a turn-based roguelite where you play as Sans Undertale. The story is ambiguous. The game begins with your silly skeleton falling. You hit the ground and you're surprised by someone telling us that we've died. This is Bosch, a sick oil demon, and he's awesome. Turns out that you're trapped in purgatory, an endless wasteland of nothingness. Your name is Noak, and there's nothing you can do about that, but there is a ray of hope. Revenge. Bosch explains that someone killed us, and whoever did will soon die themselves and arrive in purgatory as well, leaving them lost and confused, which is the perfect time to brutally kill them. Repeatedly, since no one can die in purgatory. So Bosch and Noak strike a deal. Bosch will help us navigate, and in exchange, we'll provide him something to do. On the actual gameplay side of things, the main gimmick of Brutal Orchestra is positioning your units. In battle, there are 5 slots for units on either side of the field. Every unit you control has 2 actions every turn, an ability and a movement. You can use these in any order, and all your units take their turns at once, so planning out when you should use your abilities is incredibly important. Just like in real life, you can only run at someone and punch them a single time before it's their turn. We all know the rules. There are a lot of abilities in this game, but the most common thing you're going to do is deal damage to a unit directly across from you. So you move your unit, shout punch buggy, and win the fight, right? Well, it's not always that easy. Remember that you can only move once per turn, so if you move a unit in front of an enemy and you don't immediately kill it, that unit is probably gonna take some damage in a hot second. This game is also not forgiving. Your units have low health, and if they fall in battle, they die for the rest of that run. Unless Noak dies, in which case Bosch will revive you with a tiny amount of health as long as someone else survives. The moral of the story is that you want to avoid taking damage at all costs if it's avoidable at all, meaning you need to be on your A game constantly. Luckily, there are a lot of ways to avoid damage. Each unit can only move once on your turn, but if you move a unit to an occupied space, those units will swap places, meaning that you can move someone, attack, and then move a second unit onto that same space to either attack again or simply take the hit. Some abilities also add shield to that position, negating some damage, or move a unit, allowing your little guys to avoid damage entirely. But just because you're not getting hit doesn't mean you're not taking damage. Each ability that your units have also has a cost, a certain amount of pigment. You can see what pigment you have down here at the bottom right, and every turn you get 3 yellow to start you off. But how do you get more? Well, just like in real life, the easiest way to get anything you want is through exorbitant violence. When you deal damage to a unit, you'll get a small amount of pigment based on what color their health bar is. There are 4 types: yellow, red, blue, and purple. Different units need different pigment for different abilities, like Pearl, who uses a large amount of blue pigment, or Burnout, who uses red and purple pigment. Depending on who's in your party and what abilities you want to use, you may need to prioritize attacking different enemies or attacking enemies in a specific order. But what happens if you don't have the correct pigment to use an ability? After all, I really want to kill this guy, but I don't have enough blue pigment. Well, that doesn't matter, because you can use any pigment for any ability, as long as you have enough to fill the little slots. But you don't get to do this for free. For every wrong pigment you use, that unit will take 10% of their max health as damage. If you really need to kill something, it's usually worth it, but you need to be careful because this damage can stack up quickly, especially if your abilities need a lot of pigment, so sometimes it's better just to skip a unit's turn and wait for the right colors. Unless you're like me, I don't see color, which might explain why my units keep dying. But it's still not that easy. Sure, you can skip your turn and wait for the right pigment, and if you can avoid taking any hits while doing so, you might think the fight'll be a breeze, until your pigment bar fills up. See how below your yellow pigment there are only 10 slots? You can only hold that much pigment. If you get any more, it instead goes to the overflow. Overflowing pigment can't be used for abilities, forcing you to use whatever is in the bar first before it filters in afterward. And worse yet, if your pigment is overflowing at the end of the turn, your units will take damage based on how much extra you have. There are a couple ways to avoid this though. First, you could always waste your pigment by using abilities you don't need. When you hit an enemy, it gives you pigment, just as I said before. But if you need to get rid of some pigment, that's really bad. So just punch the air. This burns through some of your pigment without adding any more, helping to avoid that end of turn damage. The second way you can avoid this damage is to have an item that helps. Items can be equipped by party members and provide a variety of helpful bonuses, from consuming extra pigment if you're overflowing to healing your party every turn, to even adding powerful abilities to your units. They're sure to help you get further. But how do you actually get them? Well, let's talk about exploration. Purgatory is pretty empty, but Bosch will help you navigate by pointing out the nearest 7-Eleven. When you're traveling, you'll be presented with 3 options. You choose whichever you want, and you'll go to that encounter. But unlike most roguelikes that provide you with a map to plan out your path, Brutal Orchestra does things very differently. You don't have a map, which might surprise you at first, but you don't actually need it. You'll notice that when you travel to an encounter, the next time you travel, the options you didn't choose will remain the same. It's more like having 3 stacks of cards in front of you. You can only see the top card of each pile, and when you visit a location, you just remove that card, revealing the next location. This means that you can effectively save encounters, which is really cool and adds a lot of strategy to traveling. If you see a shop but you don't have much cash, you can go rob some fish before you visit it later. After a certain amount of encounters, you'll be presented with the boss of an area, which are all really cool looking and provide quite the challenge. Beating them will bring you to the next area, and this process repeats until the final boss. There are a lot of different encounters you can find in Purgatory: cash, items, enemies, or shops. These can provide items or even additional party members for a price. And speaking of party members, sometimes you can find them around as well. At the start of the game, you'll get to select a party member to come along with Nowak, and the game assigns another party member randomly as a third. But as you walk through Purgatory, you can find even more friends. Many of these characters have some sort of quest you need to complete before they'll join you, but once you complete it, they'll be permanently unlocked, joining you when you find them along the way and allowing you to select them at the start of the game as well. Everyone also has 3 different movesets you can select when you begin. Each character has their own archetype that their abilities follow, but changing them around a bit can help even the spread of needed pigment or synergize well with others. Though if you find a character out in Purgatory, you can't change their moveset, so they're stuck however you find them. There are a lot of cool characters in Brutal Orchestra, like Hans, the silly little tumor man, or Aegon, who represents how I feel every single day. The game also has a real sense of humor, and I've giggled quite a bit at Bosch telling me to go make friends, or Hans telling this thing that it should put on masks so it doesn't scare the rest of the party, which honestly is a lot better, I'm not gonna lie. On that note, let's talk about aesthetics. The character designs in this game absolutely rule. The enemies are super interesting as well, making you fight everything from fish to, I don't actually know what this is, but I think it spoke to me in my dreams once. The environments are sprawling and infinite, with the garden just looking absolutely beautiful, and the whole game has a beautiful pixel art style that's just detailed enough to perfectly convey everything. I'm a huge fan of how this game looks, and the inspiration from religion is evident in everything, creating eerie environments and enemies. And the music honestly rules. It has the same feel as Undertale, these wacky, goofy, lighthearted tracks in contrast to the story. And there's a surprising amount of jazz. It might sound weird, but it really just works. There are a lot of tracks too. Pretty much every enemy encounter has their own unique theme, which I absolutely love. It's definitely one of the highlights of the game. But as much praise as I've given this game, it's not all perfect. One definite issue is that the game is really short. You only need to clear 3 areas to fight the final boss, and while there's a lot of stuff to unlock and interesting encounters to find, it feels a little grindy, and not in a fun way. Once you unlock a few of the characters, you'll probably find a team you really like, and pretty much start every run with at least one of those characters. There are also quite a few items, but not a ton, meaning you'll frequently see the same items popping up over and over, which makes runs feel very similar. It took me about 10 hours to beat the final boss multiple times and unlock a decent chunk of the characters. And while I've certainly not completed the game, I feel like I've played enough of it to be satisfied, at least for now. It's a really good game, and I like it a lot, and while I don't think it's as replayable as something like The Binding of Isaac, it certainly kept me entertained enough to be worth its price. All in all, Brutal Orchestra is a fantastic game, and while short, it's incredibly entertaining and interesting, with a great story, funny characters, and music that'll find its way onto your playlist. If it sounds interesting to you, I recommend checking it out, and you better fucking subscribe because I need to pay rent very badly. Have fun in Purgatory, and until next time, I'll see you soon.